Hegel's master-slave dialectic, a philosophical concept made easy with examples from ordinary life. Introduction. The philosopher nobody could understand. We have all heard the phrase master-slave dialectic. It appears in discussions of power, relationships, workplace dynamics, and even artificial intelligence. Yet ask most people, including many philosophy students, to explain what it actually means, and you will likely receive a nervous silence or a vague mention of some German guy who wrote impossible books. The name Georg Wilhelm Friedrich Hegel, 1770 to 1831, has become shorthand for philosophical obscurity. His prose is notoriously dense, his arguments move in triads, and his sentences often span half a page. On his deathbed, Hegel is reported to have said with characteristic frustration, "Only one man has ever understood me, and even he did not understand me." Whether apocryphal or not, the remark captures a truth. Hegel knew he was difficult. Consider a more reliable anecdote. In the late 1820s, the great German poet and polymath Johann Wolfgang von Goethe invited Hegel to dinner at his home in Weimar. Goethe, already a living legend, was curious about the philosopher whose reputation was spreading across German universities. After Hegel departed, Goethe turned to his daughter-in-law, Ottilie von Goethe, and asked for her impression. She paused and then confessed that she could not tell whether Hegel was a pure genius or a madman. Alternatively, some accounts render her response as, "He was a brilliant but deeply unclear thinker." Either way, the verdict captures the experience of generations of readers. Hegel is the philosopher whom even geniuses struggle to classify. The master-slave dialectic is arguably Hegel's most famous contribution to philosophy, yet it remains locked inside his 1807 masterpiece, The Phenomenology of Spirit, a book so challenging that even professional philosophers joke about never having finished it. This essay aims to do something simple: unlock that concept. We will not march through Hegel's impenetrable prose. Instead, we will walk through a story, a drama of two consciousnesses fighting for recognition, and then ground every twist of that drama in ordinary life. The boss, who cannot truly fire anyone, the parent who creates a dependent child, the addict enslaved to their own pleasure, and the caregiver who emerges stronger than the one they serve. By the end, Hegel's difficult insight will feel not only clear, but obvious. The person who dominates is often the one who loses, and the person who serves is often the one who grows free. Whether Ottilie von Goethe saw a madman or a genius, we can at least understand the core idea that left her uncertain. Part 1. The problem of recognition. Let's begin with a simple thought experiment. Imagine you are the only person on Earth. You eat, walk, think, and feel. Would you know you are a self? Would you have what Hegel calls self-consciousness? Surprisingly, Hegel says no. A solitary consciousness has nothing to bounce off. It is like a hand clapping in a vacuum. It makes no sound because there is no other surface to strike. To know I am, you need another eye to look at you and confirm it. Recognition, the act of being seen and acknowledged by an equal, is not a nice addition to human life. It is the very thing that creates self-awareness. But here lies the problem. Two beings, each seeking recognition from the other, do not simply hand it over. Recognition is precious precisely because it must come from a free being. If I force you to say, "You are great," the words mean nothing. If I pay you to compliment me, the compliment is worthless. What I want is your free acknowledgement. Yet the very act of demanding it destroys the freedom I need from you. This is the trap Hegel sets at the beginning of his dialectic. So what happens when two self-consciousnesses meet? According to Hegel, a life and death struggle. Not because humans are naturally violent, but because each must prove to the other that they are not merely an animal attached to biological survival. To be truly free, one must show that one values recognition more than life itself. So each risks death, each fights. And then something happens. One of them flinches. One of them values living more than being recognized. That one surrenders and says, "Do not kill me, I will serve you." That one becomes the slave or bondsman. The other, who is willing to die, becomes the master or lord. At first glance, the master has won everything. He has his recognition. He has a servant. He has power. But Hegel is about to turn the entire picture upside down. Part 2. The Master's Hollow Victory. Imagine you become the master. You have someone who calls you sir, obeys your commands, and does your labour. You sit back while they build your house, cook your food, and clean your floors. You feel powerful. You feel recognized. But ask yourself, who is recognizing you? A terrified servant who would say anything to avoid punishment. That is not an equal. That is not a free being whose respect means anything. It is like a bully who forces smaller children to say he is cool. Deep down, he knows they do not mean it. The master wanted the recognition of a free consciousness. What he got was the obedience of a broken one. His victory is hollow. He has won the fight but lost the very thing he was fighting for. Worse, the master has made himself dependent. He no longer knows how to do anything. He has outsourced all engagement with the real world to the slave. If the slave stops working, the master starves. If the slave leaves, the master is helpless. The master sits on his throne, but the throne is built on sand. His identity now depends entirely on continuing to have someone beneath him. He cannot grow, learn, or change because he never wrestles with the resistance of reality. He merely consumes. His consciousness freezes in place. He becomes a passive, bored, fragile creature, terrified of losing the very servant he pretends to rule. This is Hegel's first great reversal. The master is not free, he is trapped by his own domination. Part 3. The Slave's Secret School. Now consider the slave. The slave lives in fear. Every day is shaped by the threat of punishment or death. The slave must suppress impulses, follow orders, and serve another's will. On the surface, this is utter powerlessness. But Hegel sees something else. He calls it a secret school. The slave is forced to work, and work is not a curse. Work is engagement with the world. The slave takes raw wood and shapes it into a table. The table did not exist. The slave imagined it, then fought with the wood, its grain, its hardness, its resistance, until the wood yielded. In that process, 3 things happen. First, the slave discovers power. I changed reality. My hands made this. My mind planned this. The table becomes a mirror. The slave looks at it and sees their own efficacy reflected back. The master never gets this. The master only consumes finished goods. The slave creates. Second, the slave develops discipline. To survive, the slave must control fear, delay gratification, follow complex instructions, and persist through difficulty. These are not weaknesses. These are the exact traits that build a strong self. The slave learns patience, skill, and resilience. Third, the slave learns freedom from within. Having faced the terror of death and chosen to live, the slave has already crossed the deepest threshold. Nothing external can terrify as much as that moment did. The slave is being forged into someone who can endure, resist, and eventually stand alone. The master, meanwhile, grows soft. The slave grows hard. The master consumes. The slave creates. The master demands recognition. The slave earns the capacity to no longer need it. Hegel's second reversal is even more radical than the first. The slave is becoming free precisely through servitude. Part 4. The flip. How power actually moves. The dialectic does not end with the slave killing the master, though sometimes that happens. The flip is more subtle. Over time, the center of real power, the power to create, to endure, to understand, to act, shifts to the slave. The master becomes a hollow figurehead, dependent on the very person he dominates. The slave becomes the one who holds the actual skills, the real knowledge, and the authentic self. The master is left holding an empty title. The slave holds the world. This is not just an abstract 19th century German theory. It plays out every day in ordinary life. And perhaps this is why Ottilie von Goethe, after dinner with Hegel, could not decide whether she had met a madman or a genius. The idea that the servant is secretly the master and the master secretly a slave sounds like the riddle of a lunatic, until you see it happening in front of you. Part 5. Examples from ordinary life. Example 1. The micromanaging boss and the skilled employee. Consider a boss who must control every detail. She checks every email, rewrites every report, and refuses to delegate. She has the title. She has the corner office. She is the master. But watch closely. She has made herself indispensable in the worst way. No one else can make a decision. The moment she leaves for vacation, the team freezes. She is exhausted because she does everyone's work, and secretly, she knows she has built nothing. No systems, no leaders, no durable organization. Now look at her employee. He is micromanaged, frustrated, and underappreciated. He is the slave, but he uses his situation. He learns every process because he is forced to execute them. He builds relationships with clients while the boss hides in meetings. He studies the industry at night because he dreams of leaving. One day, he quits and starts his own successful firm. The boss is left with nothing. No skills, no team, no resilience. She hires a replacement and continues her miserable reign over an ever-shrinking domain. Who was really free? Who was really the slave? Example 2. The helicopter parent and the child. A parent does everything for their child, chooses their friends, does their homework, fights their battles. The parent is the master, making all decisions. The child is the slave, obeying but never learning. The parent feels powerful. But look closer. The parent's entire identity depends on being needed. When the child grows up and leaves, if they ever can, the parent collapses into depression and purposelessness. The parent has become a prisoner of their own care. The child, meanwhile, has been forced into dependence. But if that child later struggles, goes to therapy, learns life skills the hard way, builds independence through painful effort, that child will eventually become a real, self-reliant adult. The parent remains frozen. The child, through the work of growing up, surpasses the parent. The dialectic flips. Example 3. The addict and the drug. An addict seems to command the drug. I want pleasure. Give it to me now. The addict appears to be the master, using the substance as a tool. But Hegel would laugh at this illusion. The addict is the ultimate slave, utterly dependent, unable to function without the next dose. The drug is the true master, demanding more money, more degradation, more of the addict's life. The addict's victory is hollow. The pleasure is brief, followed by crushing need. The path to freedom is through the brutal work of withdrawal, therapy, and rebuilding a life. That work, the discipline, the fear-faced, the slow reshaping of the self, is precisely Hegel's slave labour. The recovering addict, through that struggle, becomes stronger, more self-aware, and more genuinely free than most people who have never faced such a trial. The addict who masters their addiction has gone through the secret school and come out the other side. Example 4. The caregiver and the recipient. A child cares for an aging parent with dementia. The parent demands constant attention, makes unreasonable requests, and offers no reciprocity. The parent is the master in the relationship, the one being served. The child is the exhausted slave. But watch the flip happen over years. The parent grows more fearful, more entitled, more incapable. The child develops profound empathy, logistical genius, crisis management skills, and emotional resilience. The child learns to navigate hospitals, manage finances, and endure sleepless nights. When the parent finally passes, the child is a remarkably strong human being. The parent, sadly, ended as a prisoner of their own needs. The caregiver, through service, became free. Part 6. Why Marx changed the story, and what Hegel meant all along. Many people confuse Hegel's master-slave dialectic with Marx's class struggle. They are related but deeply different. Hegel's original is about consciousness and recognition. It is a drama inside the human spirit. The slave finds freedom through inner transformation, work, discipline, and the memory of fear. The master's loss is psychological and spiritual. No one needs to die or revolt. The flip happens because the slave becomes a different kind of self. Marx's twist is about economics and material power. Marx took Hegel's story out of the mind and put it in the factory. The capitalist, master, exploits the worker, slave. The worker's labour is alienated, taken and sold back to him. But through collective struggle, the workers recognise their shared situation, unite, and overthrow the system by force. Marx's flip is literal, political, and revolutionary. Both are powerful, but Hegel's version is stranger and more intimate. It says that the person washing dishes, raising children, or coding software in a cubicle may already be more free than the CEO who signs their paycheck, because freedom is not a title, it is a capacity forged in struggle. Conclusion: the truth about power. Hegel's master-slave dialectic ultimately reveals a deeply counterintuitive truth about human life. We think power is about commanding others. Hegel shows that command without recognition is hollow. We think freedom is about having no one above us. Hegel shows that freedom is built in service, discipline, and creative work. We think the winner of the fight is the one who walks away standing. Hegel shows that the one who flinches, who chooses to live and serve, may be the one who eventually stands alone, while the victor grows soft on a rotting throne. The master needs the slave to be the master. The slave, through the very act of serving, builds the skills and self to one day no longer need a master at all. That is the dialectic. That is the flip. And perhaps that is why Hegel, on his deathbed, sighed that only one man understood him, and even he did not. Hegel was not being arrogant. He was acknowledging that his insight is hard to hold on to because it goes against everything we assume about power. We are all tempted to be the master. We all want the title, the corner office, the final word. Hegel whispers from 2 centuries ago, "Be careful. That path may lead not to freedom, but to a hollow, dependent cage." The real road to selfhood goes the other way, through the workshop, the struggle, and the long, patient labour of shaping a world that will one day recognise you as free. As for Ottilie von Goethe, she left that dinner in Weimar uncertain whether she had encountered a pure genius or a madman. The answer, perhaps, is that Hegel was both. Only a mind on the edge of madness would claim that the slave is freer than the master. Only a true genius would turn out to be right. Once you see the master-slave dialectic in the exhausted parent, the micromanaged employee, the recovering addict, and the devoted caregiver, you cannot unsee it. It is not just a philosophy. It is a description of how human beings actually grow, not on top of each other, but through each other, in the slow, difficult, beautiful work of becoming real.